There are some weapons in 40k used by the Imperial Guard that you can't help but think, with Plasma, Melta, and Bolter, why do we even use this? And if you play tabletop as Guard, or read the title, there's one that comes to mind. The Autocannon. A weapon that by name sounds awesome, but seems to get consistently overshadowed by its counterparts. Today we're going to dive into the lore of the Autocannon as a weapon platform in the Guard, why it's used, how it's portrayed on tabletop, while taking a look at the autocannons in our world to see just how little has changed with this paradoxically niche but versatile weapon. And if this sounds like the kind of Warhammer gun lore you've been wanting to hear, leave a like and sub. The autocannon is well known throughout the Imperium thanks to being around since the second millennium. Its creation to solve multiple problems armed forces faced, those being the ability to attack light fortifications from farther ranges than standard issue weapons, the ability to give planes the means to combat aerial targets with greater efficiency, as 30 cal and even 50 cal would begin to struggle with the more armored planes, the same for the ground as autocannons would be used to target light vehicles and could even be capable of damaging the tracks on tanks, or if the crew was lucky, get a shot at the rear and damage the engine, scoring a mobility kill. There's even anti-infantry applications, although that's more limited as the rate of fire tends to be lower than machine guns. The versatility can be attributed to there being a plethora of options for munitions that allow a singular autocannon to engage multiple targets. However, with the invention of the heavy bolter, blast cannon, and crack rockets, all of which perform their specific tasks exceptionally well, we see the autocannon begin to take a back seat. Even the Adeptus Astartes would favor the bolter over the autocannon, though there would be exceptions, those being dreadnoughts and Astartes in Terminator armor. The sentiment being the bolters were plenty lethal and also enjoyed a variety of ammunition while also being smaller and having higher rate of fire. Though I should say this applies more to the loyalist chapters, the Legionis Astartes or Traitor Marines are much more willing to use them. The autocannon is relatively simple and easy to maintain, which helps those traitor warbands that don't have logistics to maintain more complicated weaponry. On the subject of Astartes, that begs the question, do they find the autocannon to be a threat? Well, it depends on the autocannon. Even in 40k, you'll see a variety of autocannons with crew surge being something to take note of, but not quite a mortal threat. But a Reaper autocannon has been shown to kill an Astartes in Terminator armor. So, sorry guys, in this instance, size matters. But enough of that. Let's talk about the faction that uses the autocannon the most, the Imperial Guard. You see, a lot of uptight, narrow-minded generals will look at all the cool shit they have and turn away from the autocannons, saying they don't kill infantry as well as a heavy bolter or a multi-laser, nor can they penetrate armor like a las cannon or crack missiles. Problem they forget being now you need to bring supplies for 4 weapon systems, including ammunition, power packs, materials for maintenance, and have crew who know how to operate each system that probably aren't cross-trained on every crew-served weapon, and might not know how to use the others if needed. Unless you're Cadian, because you're just great at everything. I forget you have such an awesome plan. Let's talk about the commanders that have to wage war on a budget. They look at the autocannon and think a jack of all, master of none will always be preferable to a master of one. Heavy infantry, autocannon. Scouts need a well-rounded armament, autocannon. Need to counter a light vehicle spearhead? Double autocannon. Airborne enemies? 4 autocannons. A Baneblade needs to range its shots. Coaxial autocannon. Can our planes use autocannons for strafing runs? You bet your ass they can. Just like that, we reduced a lot of fancy weapons that would make the Departmental Minitorum clerk want the Emperor's mercy to one simple platform. Sure, there's going to be different calibers, but regardless, we just turn this guy into Hank Hill by dealing in autocannon and autocannon accessories. And you know what faction autocannons do really well fighting against? The Tyranids. Turns out the autocannon is quite capable of piercing a majority of the bug's armor, where a heavy bolter would struggle with, without going full overkill like you would get with las cannons and meltas. Which is rather poetic that a weapon built with versatility can counter the most versatile buyer form race to an extent. I'm telling you, in lore, the autocannon is slept on. But what about the tabletop? In reality, when you look through the index cards, you see there is an extensive use of the autocannon on tabletop with a wide range of purposes from anti-infantry, anti-air, anti-elite infantry, and anti-light vehicles. There are 6 factions that use at least 3 different autocannons in their roster: Imperial Guard, Space Marines, Chaos Marines, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, and Leagues of Votan, with strengths ranging from 5 to 9, AP from 0 to 2, damage from 1 to 3, and attacks from 2 to 20, with types that include single, twin, quad, coaxial, rotary, and chain autocannons. That's something worth mentioning. If the weapon profile says cannon and doesn't have blast or use D3, D6 to determine shots, it's an autocannon as opposed to, well, a cannon. Needless to say, there is no way I can cover them all when I try to keep my videos under 10 minutes. So I'm going to stick with the guard in this one. If you'd like me to cover one of the other factions' autocannons in depth, let me know in the comments. Let's start with an aircraft of the Imperial Guard, the Vulture gunship, a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that uses 2 rotary cannons. Now, given these are under the wings and not very large compared to the aircraft, I'm willing to wager these would be comparable to the M61 Vulcan, which I mentioned briefly in this video. Now, given there's no AP value, and it has a rule stating units attacked by it need to take a battle shock test, we'll go with it using high explosive incendiary. Funny enough, you also see this weapon profile on the Rogel Dorn, though with less shots. I imagine as it's a secondary weapon, so there's not as much ammo, but who knows. Next, we have the Lehman Russ Punisher. Other Punisher. Now, you might think a rotary cannon on a tank chassis is wild, but it's not as outlandish as you think. There are instances where tank chassis have been converted into self-propelled anti-air vehicles that primarily use autocannons. However, in our world, we would see a rotary cannon used on an armored personnel carrier converted into SPAA, like the M113A1, which is also sporting the M61 Vulcan. Now, the Punisher has a strength of 6, which we could argue is because it uses armor-piercing incendiary ammunition, which can penetrate 36 millimeters of armor at 100 meters, which you might ask why the AP value is still 0. It makes sense when you compare it to our next tank, the Lehman Russ Exterminator, sporting twin autocannons. Now, here's where the rant starts. It explicitly states that this tank is meant to engage light vehicles. APCs are considered light vehicles, but the Chimera hull is 100 millimeters, and the Scout Salamander's hull is 130 millimeters. To give you context, that's comparable to the German Tiger H1 tank. And mind you, the whole armor of a Lehman Russ is 150 millimeters. But wait! You have to multiply that value by 3 before it's comparable to our world's armor. Here's where I gotta level with you. Warhammer 40k and numbers mixed like that guy and deodorant. There's a point where I have to decide, do I go by the letter of the lore, that's 22 years old in this case, or the spirit of the lore, the purpose defining the power? I'm going with the latter, specifically in this case. So, with all that mess out of the way, a good comparison is the M42 rocking twin 40mm Bofors autocannons with 70 millimeters of pin at 100 meters. With double the pin, I'm good with saying that'd be worth -1 AP. As while this can rip through light vehicles in our world no problem, it'll struggle with dedicated armor. This also makes the Hydra easy, as the same profile means it's just carrying 4 of the 40mm Bofors. While there were no SPAAs that did this that I can find, we have a naval turret that follows this concept, albeit loosely. The autocannon on the Baneblade would be the same, though that is a hell of a coaxial that can be used for raging shots. Sentinel and Salamanders, same thing. I know very much if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. We hit a snag when we get to the autocannon used by the heavy weapons team. The profile is the same, except there is no way 2 guys can move a 40mm cannon when normally it would be on a 2-axle carriage. So we need an autocannon in the 20-ish mil range, as those can be on a single axle carriage and maneuvered by 2 guys, but still have comparable ballistics to the 40mm Bofors. Hear me out. M242 Bushmaster 25mm chain gun. Now, I haven't seen any instances of this on a single axle carriage, but I have seen 30mm on one, so it's not a major leap, and being able to pin 80mm of armor at 100mm is comparable to the Bofors, as I'm not going to split hairs over a 10mm difference. Also, this is what would be, I consider, a coaxial for the Rogel Dorn, as that turret would be pretty cramped with the 40mm. And finally, the same would go for the twin autocannons of the Torox. Last thing of note is I appreciate GW at keeping the rate of fires in line with how the platforms are set up. Single cannons are low with 2 shots. Dual cannons are moderate, getting 4 to 8 shots. Quad are only at 4, but anti-fly and twin leaked help represent that you're putting out so many shots in the air you're gonna hurt a flying target. And rotary cannons are just the bullet hoses you expect, with them getting anywhere from 12 to 20 shots. All in all, I think GW has done a pretty good job of showing the variety of autocannons and how their purposes vary. As a point, you could run an army where your primary firepower consists of autocannons autocannons and actually has some teeth. That's not theorycraft either. Fans of Morty and Glory know he made an army based around autocannons and proved it can perform well on the table. Thank you all for watching. This one was a little different as we touched on a lot of vehicles instead of infantry weapons, but I've always believed autocannons were slept on and needed some attention. Let me know if you agree with my comparisons, and I'll see you next time out in the warp.